Just chat, exactly.
Yeah, a couple of Brothers fans, just having a chat.
Okay.
Just hanging around.
All right.
Here with Joe Milliken, author, fan, guy we talked to back when the Rock Hall induction was going on, we met back in April.
April, yep.
And you were in the process then of finishing up the book, which is called what?
It's called Let's Go. Mm-hmm. Benjamin Orr and the Cars. It's been a long journey.
I bet.
That's for sure. You know, first book I've ever done. I've been a published writer for 20 years, but it's all been newspapers and magazines up till now.
Right.
And so writing a book is a whole different animal. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'll be the first to admit I was green when I started doing this whole thing, you know.
Yeah, and it took you some time to do the whole project.
It did take some time, yeah. 11 years in the making.
Wow.
And, you know, I have another job, too, another full-time job, and I have other writing stuff I do, too. Mm-hmm. You know, I publish my own music-related website, and I do some freelance writing, and I have a family, and plus my other job. So, you know, I'd kind of work on the book in my spare time when I could. And so it was a really long process. And of course, you know, the subject, Ben, unfortunately, has been, you know, passed away for almost 20 years now. So obviously you can't interview the man himself.
Right.
So what's the next best thing? You try to get in touch with as many people who knew him as you could. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I just started interviewing some people, and I met some people who knew him when he lived back in Cleveland before he ended up in Boston. And those people gave me a couple of contacts, and I started interviewing those people, and it just went from there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's weird. You kind of you don't realize how many people a rock star can know. I mean, I eventually had to, you know, because some people say 11 years. I mean, who the heck did you talk to?
Yeah.
I could still be doing interviews today if I wanted to. Eventually, I had to cut it off because, you know, every person I interviewed, well, have you talked to so-and-so? Mm-hmm. You haven't talked to so-and-so?
Oh, right.
Well, here's his number. You have to talk to so-and-so.
The book's going to be this big, you know, by the time you're done.
Yeah, we're talking War and Peace, you know?
Right.
And you go to the next person, and they go, did you talk to so-and-so? Mm-hmm. And it's just on and on and on. So eventually you have to try to weed out some of that stuff and figure out who the most important people are. I mean, everyone's important, of course, but like you said, the book had ended up being that thick.
You have to find those people who tell the best story to relate to people who are reading the book.
Yeah. And you learn things as you go along. You know, people will tell you things and they'll explain their versions of stuff, and but then you'll go and interview somebody else, and they'll tell you their own version of something, and then you go back and go, well, this person told me this. So you kind of have to navigate through that stuff, and you eventually changing things as you go along, and adding things, taking things out. Eventually you find out, well, this is more important than this. This doesn't really need to be here now. So all these things combined made it a really long and involved process.
I find it fascinating that, you know, because when you tell a story, say it's something that happens at a concert. Well, there's so many people that are there. You would think they all see the same thing, yet they all have their different spin on it based on their own perspective and their own relationship with a guy like Ben, who, you know, was very outgoing and knew a lot of people.
Yeah, I tell you, once the book came out, I had people come back to me who I interviewed for the book, and they might not have ended up in the book.
Yeah.
But I had so many people read this book and who knew Ben intimately, and will come back to me and go, oh my God, I didn't know this about Ben. Really? That I knew Ben so well, I had no idea. What band was he in? Yeah. I mean, everybody, all of them would come back to me and tell me things. And then they'd also, like, they'd read stuff and they'd go, oh, I knew that, but did you know this? Mm-hmm. Oh, Joe, I wish I told you about this. And like I said, it could have just gone on and on and on forever.
Let's give a little perspective on Ben. Grew up here in Cleveland, out in the Parma Heights neighborhood. They called him Benny 11.
Benny 11
because it was Ben Orr, but the whole name was
Orzechowski.
Which
is
common
exactly,
Slovak name in here in Cleveland,
but
you know.
not exactly a rock and roll name.
No, that's not. Yeah, that'd be tough to doesn't roll off the tongue, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess they say that they could never either know how to pronounce it or remember the name at all, or how to spell it, so they just kind of turned it into Benny 11 letters.
And then Ben Orr came from that. Did he do that, or was that somebody that, like, a manager or something?
He did that.
He did that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He just
And
shortened it up for
It
him.
made sense.
And he was in, we're talking, obviously talking about the Cars, you know, that's where he's most known from. But he was in all these other bands and all these, you know, with different groups of guys here in Cleveland before he kind of moved out and did his own thing.
Yeah, and you know, people have asked me, you know, why did you pick Ben? Why do you write about Ben? And it's true. You know, when I took this project on, I knew I wanted to write a book, and the only thing I really knew that it was going to be music related because that's my passion.
Right.
I'm not a player, so I have to write about it. That's my way of being involved in music.
Okay.
Because I'm not a player, I write about it. So I knew I wanted to be music related, and I had a short list of ideas, but I still hadn't quite figured out what I wanted the subject to be. And a Cars fan, and this is going back now, this is 11 years ago now, so
Okay.
this is even before Facebook, so we're talking MySpace.
Okay.
Remember MySpace?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I had a MySpace account,
Yeah.
and a Cars fan saw my MySpace page, saw that I was a writer or a music journalist, saw that I am from Boston, and that's where the Cars
Right.
obviously launched. I listed the Cars as one of my favorite bands. So this person got a hold of me, and she said, I think you should write a book about Ben. Just out of the blue.
Really?
Yeah, so it was happenstance. So, you know, I'm like, well, okay, I love the Cars, but, you know, why wouldn't I just make it a Cars book?
Right.
And if you think about it, if you were going to write about an individual of the band, why wouldn't it be Rick Ocasek?
Exactly.
Because he was the leader of the band.
Right.
You know, tall, quirky guy, songwriter. You know, why wouldn't it be Rick? And all she said was, just take a look at it. Investigate him a little bit. You know, he's from Cleveland.
Yeah.
Take a look. So I went and I started investigating it, and that's when I discovered this whole other thing about Ben. I mean, I didn't know he was from Cleveland.
Yeah.
And of course, the great connection of it being the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right,
I mean,
right.
so that right there makes it cool. And I started investigating him, and I found out that, you know, here's this guy who was basically a teen star as a kid, you know. Start his first band, he was 13 years old. He was a drummer. I mean, and the band would like play bars and stuff, and they'd have to sneak him in the back door
Get outta
so
here.
he could play.
Yeah.
And his parents were very supportive of his music. You know, it states in the book that he left school as a sophomore in high school. And you think about that today, and that would be like, oh my God,
Right.
that's blasphemy today.
Right.
You know, but back then, I don't think it was. You know, I think a lot of people would, not a lot, but people.
They would go to take a job, or they'd help the family out, or stuff like
people
that.
were more
Yeah.
apt to leave school
Right.
at an earlier age back then. And but his parents were very supportive of him, and they gave him his blessing when he left school.
Wow.
So anyway, here's this 13-year-old kid, and he's in a band playing in bars.
Right.
He started out as a drummer, which I thought was really cool because
Yeah.
of course everyone now knows him as a
the
bass
big,
player.
yeah, and the singer. Yeah.
And here he is at 13 years old in his first band, and then as a sophomore in high school, he quits school to become a professional musician, and then he ends up joining the Grasshoppers, which was at the time one of the hottest bands in the city.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, the original leader of the Grasshoppers, Dante Rossi, who I interviewed for the book, is going to be at my upcoming event.
Oh, cool.
So I've gotten to meet a lot of these guys. And,
That's
well,
awesome.
not face to face yet. I'm going to meet them, but you know, talking on the phone and doing all these interviews
Right.
and stuff. So when he was leaving the Grasshoppers, he had Benny kind of take his spot. So now here's this kid, 17 years old, and he is in the house band of the TV show Upbeat.
Right.
And you know, for people who don't know about Upbeat, it's basically the American Bandstand version for Cleveland.
Right, for Cleveland, right.
You know,
Yeah.
it was set up a little differently. I think they did do lip syncing on that
Did
show.
they really? Yeah.
But they would have these national artists come in
Yeah.
and do the hit song of the day, but they would have house bands behind them playing.
So that the kids could still dance and
Right,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they would go into Cleveland and find bands to, you know, and it was kind of like a rotating thing. And at one point, the Grasshoppers were the house band for Upbeat.
very cool.
So I'm researching this stuff, and I'm like, here's this kid who quit school at the age of, I mean, how many kids at the age of 13 already know what they want to do in life?
Right.
I mean, God, I barely figured it out
Now,
recently.
last week,
You
right?
know what I mean?
Right, right.
And this 13-year-old kid already knows what he wants to do in life.
He had a passion.
And now here he is, 17 years old. He left school to be a professional musician, and now his band is a house band. And Upbeat at one point was nationally syndicated to like 80 cities across the country.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, this is unbelievable.
He's getting all that exposure.
And this is what? Like 15 years before he ever became famous in the Cars. And that was the hook for me right there. I can remember going back and asking a couple of friends that were Cars fans, and I'm like, did you know anything? Do you know anything about Ben Orr?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's the bass player.
Right.
I mean, some Cars fans didn't even know that he was a co-singer.
Oh.
Everybody assumed Rick
It was just Rick?
Was just Rick
Oh,
as a
God.
vocalist.
Oh,
So-
Drive and all those great
yeah,
songs
so
that Ben did. Yeah.
So Cars fans, like some of them didn't even realize that he sang with the Cars.
Interesting.
So for any of these people to know what he did earlier in life, basically nobody I talked to, and I'm thinking, this is it.
That's a book.
And that's when I made the decision to write specifically about Ben, and not have it be a Cars book or a book about a band, but a biography about an individual musician. And that's how it came about.
Since he passed, it's got to be tough because again, you're taking stories from people. You're not getting it directly. I mean, you got, like you said, you have to navigate through some things. But was it easier to find the real happy, positive stories? Were people willing to share some of the troubles that Ben had?
Well, that is a whole other part of it, and part of the reason why it took me so long to put this together. Besides the fact that I was, it's not like in the movies. It's not like I was, sitting in my office
Right.
8 hours
You're
a day.
a busy
banging
man,
away
yeah.
on my typewriter. I would just do it in my spare time. But that is definitely one of the main reasons why it took so long, because there were so many people that you needed to get a hold of, and I would reach out to these people, and as the project went along, I learned very early on in the project that Ben was a very private individual. He didn't, and even after he became world famous, he didn't seek out the spotlight.
Yeah.
I kind of describe it in other interviews, and I don't know if I say it exactly this way in the book, but he flipped a switch to be a rock star and go on stage.
Really?
Yep. Time to go on stage and entertain.
Two different personas.
Yep. Entertain these people for 2 hours, and he'd flip his rock star switch, and he'd go out on stage and be the amazing Benjamin Orr, and then he'd come back off stage and he'd flip that switch back off, and he'd just become a normal guy.
Wow.
And he avoided the spotlight. And I learned this stuff, and as I went along and looked at Cars interviews and stuff, I would notice that. If the band was doing an interview and he was asked a specific question, of course he would answer it, but he sat in the background a lot. The other guys in the band did more talking than him. So I kind of sensed it. I'm like, yeah, these people are right. He didn't want to be in the spotlight. I guess I shouldn't say he didn't want to be, but he wasn't that kind of guy.
He didn't thrive from it, like maybe some other artists might.
Yeah, so the people who knew him that were closest to him obviously already knew this about him, So here's this, none of these people knew me from a hole in the wall. Who's this writer guy from Boston? What are you doing?
Right,
You know what I mean?
Cleveland, right.
Yeah, they
Right.
don't know me from a hole in the wall. So in a lot of cases, I had to, before I could even interview these people, I'd have to somehow convince them or gain their trust.
That it wasn't just you weren't knocking Ben. It
Yeah.
wasn't a book about all of his problems, the troubles that he had.
Yeah, and
You
a lot of rock star books or music related books are, the backstage stuff,
Right.
and, the dirt,
Sure.
that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I didn't want it to be that way either. You know what I mean? I guess you have to add a little bit of that stuff.
You have to include
in
some
here.
of it. It is his life. It is a biography,
You're
so you
right.
have to cover everything that may be good or not
You're
so
right.
good.
It
yeah.
is part of the story, and not that I did this. Money wasn't the reason I did this.
Yeah.
Because if it was, I would have tried to do it in 2 years and not 12.
Right.
So the monetary part of it had nothing to do with it. But yeah, I had to convince these people to want to talk to me, and it really went above and beyond that even. So I would convince somebody that to participate, but they would still be reluctant. So in many of these cases, whether it be phone interviews, I did a lot of email interviews too. Only a few in-person interviews, obviously, because a lot of the people I talked to were in Cleveland and Boston. I'm up in Vermont.
Sure.
So the process would go, I would put some questions. So say it was an email one.
Yeah.
I would put some email questions together, and I'd send them to these people. And they would take their time, think about it, do their responses, send them back to me. But it wouldn't even stop there. They would say, well, what are you going to do with my quotes? Are you going to, are you going to twist them around?
Yeah.
How are you going to rewrite it?
Right.
That kind of thing.
That's because people cared about Ben. They were protective of him.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because that was part of what I was going to say, is that they cared about him. They were very protective of him. And again, they knew how private of a guy he was, and he's not here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, I would kind of be speaking for him, and
Right.
they are speaking for
True.
him. So I would take their responses, do my writing part, and turn them into quotes, and then I would send those quotes back to them.
So they knew.
So they could look them over,
Yeah.
edit them, take this out, add this in. No, I want to change this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very long and involved process.
But they end up trusting you a little bit more because they see what you're actually doing.
Yeah,
in that process of the book.
And the best part of that is, for the most part, once the book came out, there were no surprises.
That's great.
People weren't coming back to me going, I didn't tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait a minute. I didn't quite put it that way, Joe. You twisted that around. I mean, most of these people already knew what their part
Right.
was going to be in that book before it even came out. I wasn't thinking about that at the time. At the time, I was thinking, "Oh my God," pulling my hair out.
I'm just trying to get this done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really want. Yeah, can we just do this?
Right. Were the cars involved at all? Were you able to talk to any of those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 of the 4 surviving members are in the book.
Okay.
Greg Hawkes, the keyboard player,
Mm-hmm.
and David Robinson, the drummer, were kind enough to participate.
Great.
Rick Ocasek and Elliot Easton declined. Elliot, I won't even get into the Elliot part because I didn't really, how do I say this? It was kind of through his publicist, and I never really got to really get in depth with him about it. But Rick was really important to me, and I won't lie to you, it was disappointing to me that I didn't get him in the end. I didn't get him in there. I'm not going to lie about that. I really wanted him to be involved, being the leader of the band, and him and Ben were the 2 that really started the band.
And they'd been together since Cleveland.
Since Cleveland, yep. Rick is originally from the Maryland area, but his family moved Columbus, I believe, in his early life, a teenager. And that's how they met. They were both in bands locally and would run into each other, and they eventually got together that way. But I really did want Rick to be in there, and
Because there's so much talk about the breakup and the split too, that I'm sure that would have given a lot of perspective on why that happened and why that they felt they couldn't work together anymore.
Yeah, and I had to be obviously I had to be more vague about it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't actually, I'm not going to put words in the guy's mouth. So, but you know what? In a way, maybe that was okay too, because I really wanted this to be a positive book. I didn't really want to dwell on the band. I mean, it's obvious it happened, and it's obvious that there was some butting of heads there, or they would have never broke up, right? The truth is the truth.
But the idea is to bring people into the life of Ben as a younger man, some of the struggles he had, some of the cool things that he was able to do as a teenager, and then build on this career and make it, nationally and internationally too.
Right. So, if I was able to talk to Rick, obviously I would have talked a little bit more about specifics with the band breaking up, but I wasn't able to do that. But I did go through the proper channels trying to get a hold of Rick, going through his publicist, his PR team, and I couldn't get anywhere. But I interviewed, because obviously, like you just said, there's the Cleveland part of Ben's life, and there's the Boston part too, once they went to Boston. So I also interviewed a lot of people in the Boston area. And I interviewed a gentleman named Louis Aria, who is an independent filmmaker now, and he knew the band back in the 80s. When the Cars bought their own studio in Boston, it was called Synchro Sound. There was some space on the upper level, and they rented space to this guy because he was making TV commercials and stuff like that. So he was friends with Rick. So, and it goes back to, oh, did you interview this person? Did you interview this person?
Here's somebody else that comes up.
I got to Louis.
Yeah.
And I interviewed Louis, and he was really great to me. And that was one of his questions. Who else in the band did you interview? And I told him. He goes, so you haven't talked to Rick? Nope, I've tried, but I haven't been able. Well, what did he say? I don't even know. I didn't even get that far.
Yeah.
He says, well, I'm still friends with Rick.
Oh, okay.
And he was kind enough to talk to Rick on my behalf. It's funny. I told you that I also have my own website.
Yeah.
And I do music-related articles. So as I was interviewing some of these people, if they were involved in music and entertainment, I'd kind of do separate articles with them for my website
for the website,
too.
sure.
So
Why
I
not?
wrote an article about Lewis,
Okay.
and his whole filmmaking career and stuff. And when I finished the article and put it on my website, I also sent him the link, and he put it on his face page.
Very cool.
So Rick is still friends with him. And obviously he's friends with Rick's wife Paulina,
Yeah.
the famous model.
Oh, yeah.
And she saw the link
Yeah.
on Lewis's Facebook page and called him up and said, "Lewis, I saw this article
Yeah.
that was written about you. That's really cool." Yeah. That was written by my friend Joe Milliken. Oh, by the way,
Right.
do you know what he's doing? He's the guy who's writing the book about Ben Orr.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice. And they just talked, and I think that conversation might have even happened before Lewis told me he was going to approach Rick
Yeah.
on my behalf. So Paulina tells Rick, "Oh,
Rick.
there's this cool article that was written about Lewis."
Yeah.
So Rick goes and reads the article, and Rick calls Lewis up. "Lewis, how you doing? We haven't talked in a long time.
Right.
Great article written about you." "Oh yeah, that's great. Oh, by the way, Rick, that was written by Joe Milliken."
Yeah.
And Joe Milliken's writing the book about Ben.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that nice? And, yeah.
Okay.
And he didn't get into too much specifics
Right,
about
but-
the conversation.
Needless to say, he wasn't on board.
Cutting to the chase,
Yeah.
he talked to him about it, and Lewis did tell me that he's like, "Joe, I really tried hard because I wasn't even sure if I was going to interview with you, but I see the integrity you've put
Right.
into this.
Right.
I see that it's not a tell-all kind of book.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a serious biography about a lifelong serious musician, and I know the approach you're taking. So I know that is what he said to Rick. So he did, and obviously he still declined.
Yeah.
But he did give his blessing.
Oh, good.
He told Lewis, he said, "I love Ben. I miss him. He deserves this.
Good.
And, tell him good luck with it." But he declined.
Yeah.
And, Lewis came back and told me that, and I was really disappointed. But another thing Lewis said to me that helped me put it in perspective, he says, "Joe, you can't take it personal because for years and years and years, Rick wouldn't talk to Rolling Stone magazine or the New York Times about
Right,
Ben.
right.
Never mind, not to say you're,
Right, but
menial, but
a writer from Vermont.
A writer from Vermont.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
So you can't take it personal. And I know recently, in the last few years, especially since the band got inducted into the Rock Hall, Rick has softened up a little bit on the subject of Ben. I have read a couple of articles now recently where he is, asked questions about it, and he still doesn't say much.
Right.
But he will talk about him a little bit more. But so, in the end, maybe he was concerned about how much I would put in there, or yeah, Lewis,
It's understandable.
Lewis is his friend, but Lewis doesn't know exactly what I'm putting in that book.
Exactly.
So it must have been in the back of his mind
Sure.
somewhere. I guess he just didn't want to take the chance, I guess, and do it.
The book is called Let's Go. It's the biography of Benjamin Orr from Cleveland in the Cars. As we wrap up, what do you want people to kind of take away from the book? What do you want people to know most about Ben?
What do I want people to know? Well, people who know Ben and know the Cars already know his talent and how amazing of a musician he was. Very well-rounded. Like I said, he started out as a drummer, and he was when he went to the Grasshoppers, he was the rhythm guitar player and the singer.
Wow.
He was able to adapt his talents to whatever his band needed at the time. No ego involved.
Yeah.
When he got involved in the Cars, he was actually just the lead singer for a bit. But then Rick suggested, you should strap on a bass. Okay, I'll play bass.
Yeah.
So he was able to adapt his talents to whatever the band needed.
That's cool.
And he was able to put his ego aside. So that's one thing I want people to know. On a personal level, I want people to know how genuine he was and how loyal of a guy he was. I've told you how I've interviewed a lot of people who knew him when he was young.
Yeah.
And after the Cars became famous, he would still, call up his buddies that he was in bands with when he was a kid. When the Cars were on tour and they were getting ready to come through Cleveland, he'd call up all his friends okay, I'm going to be in Cleveland in June, get ready.
Yeah.
You know, and not only that, not only would he go see these guys, he would get them tickets to the show, backstage passes, limos picking them up at their house. His friends tell me stories whenever they would get together. Wouldn't let any of them spend a dime. You know, I heard a long time ago that Elvis kind of had a small circle of friends, and he didn't really go outside of that. He didn't, you know, he didn't want this huge entourage. And Ben was kind of like that too. He had a small circle of friends. These are the people I want to be around, and he kind of kept it that way. You know, there's a gentleman, Wayne Weston, who was the drummer in the Grasshoppers for a while, and I'm going to be seeing him this weekend too, and he's in the book. He would tell me that Ben would call him up and say, I want to see you guys. And there was another friend, Chris Camberoff, who was in a couple of bands with him. I want to see you guys. He would fly them to Boston. He'd put them on a plane, fly them to Boston, stay at the house for a few days, and fly them back.
That's great.
So that's what I want people to know, that he was just a genuine guy. He was a loyal guy, and he loved Cleveland. Always talked about Cleveland. Always made sure he came back to Cleveland, and he was always very proud of the city. And it's kind of disappointing and sad in a way that he's not around now.
But he left such a great legacy.
I can't even imagine how he would feel to now be a part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah.
And I've researched this, and I guess I don't know, I'm 99% sure. He is the first native Clevelander to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's a couple others, like, you know, Chrissy Hine, the Pretenders, but she's not from Cleveland.
She's Akron area.
She's Akron, right. You know, and Devo is now getting inducted,
Akron area
but
as well.
they're not Cleveland. He is the first, and I believe only native Clevelander that has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So just imagine what he would think of this now. You know what I mean? Being so loyal to the city and loving where he came from. I can't even imagine what he would think of it, you know? And I have a little joke, you know, because when I talk about the book taking me 11 years to get done, Benny 11 letters. And my publicist and I, when we got our book deal, they said it was going to be released in November, the book, and we said, can you make that November 11th, 11 for Benny 11 letters?
It's got to be.
So all these little things that have just kind of fallen into place.
Meant to
and,
be.
you know, it took this long to do the book, but the same year the book comes out is the same year that the Cars get inducted into the Rock Hall.
That's pretty awesome.
So it just seemed like all these things just culminated at the end, and
meant to be.
It can't get much better, for me anyway.
Joe Milliken's the author. It's Let's Go, the Ben Orr biography. You can get it online?
Yes, you can.
Get the book online?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Just to let everyone know, I also we created a website for the book. It's real simple, benorbook.com.
I like
you
it.
You can go there, tell some stories, give some pictures. You can order the book there, too.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And this interview is happening on 1/11. How about that?
Oh, look at that.
Hey!
Wow. Look at that. I didn't think about that.
Wow.
See? Meant